All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network's Going Solo Veterans Corner. Once again, I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert from Northern Virginia. Our goal is to connect U.S. veterans, sharing their experiences and how they've made the adjustment back to civilian life and what they're doing to make a difference in their communities today. But before we meet our guest tonight, I'd like to take just a moment to thank our sponsor of tonight's show, Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a veteran-owned information technology and management consulting company designated an 8A business by the U.S. Small Business Administration and certified service-disabled veteran-owned small business. NIS is a professional performance management corporation that delivers first-class services and support to their clients in both the federal and private sector. So we're going to have their website on the show tonight. It's a little long, so I'm not going to call it out now, but you can look at their website, get the information, or you can call their owner, CK Park, at 703-750-0453. So thank you, NIS, for sponsoring our veteran show. All right, let's meet tonight's guest, Aram Rice. Aram spent his time as an information technology submariner in the U.S. Navy's, of course, submarine fleet. Aram was assigned to the LA class USS Newport News. I guess it was, I believe, we'll have to ask him about this, called the Thunder from Below. It was commissioned in 1985. So we'll find out more about that as we talk to Aram tonight. Welcome to the program, Aram.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on here, Paul. Thank you for your service, by the way.
Yeah, it's good. I believe, I'd have to look back, but I believe you're the first Navy veteran that we've had on the show so far. So I'm kind of anxious as we get into the talk to find out, a little bit more, especially about the submarine service. But I got to ask you a question, and I believe, as you and I talk, you're still kind of a newlywed, aren't you?
That's right. My 1 year anniversary is coming up in July, actually. We're looking today for Airbnbs because we're traveling over to Napa for we're calling it our honeymoon number 2, I think, just to celebrate the anniversary. So we're getting excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of remember those days a few years ago. So she was the one who made you give up the old Navy cliche of a girl in every port, huh?
You could say that. You could definitely say that.
Well, I think you better say that since we're broadcasting on here and she's going to see it. It's probably a good idea.
Well, she can hear me right now, so she's probably writing notes, getting ready for stuff later.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more of this. So it's interesting. I think I found it really interesting when we talked and you told me that you were in the submarine service. So I want to talk about that a little bit more. But first, tell us, how did you get into the submarine service? What made you decide to go into the Navy, into the submarine service?
Well, I was a sucker, I'll tell you that.
Did you fall for that recruiter's promises?
I sure did. Yeah. So I went into the recruiters. Initially I went into the Air Force recruiters because my father, he's a retired lieutenant colonel, 25 years in the Air Force. Retired. He's a great man. He's done a lot of great things. He worked at the Pentagon for a while. So, his influence, I definitely wanted to go into the Air Force. But even with college at the time, they just weren't taking as many people. So I walked over to the Navy. I was like, that's second best. And, I got a pretty decent ASVAB score. And so they said, hey, you could be a nuke or, you could be a submariner. And they told me, submariners get paid more. They get incentive pay. And I said, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. I'll do that. Well, it's $100 a month that goes away in taxes.
Yeah. I'm kind of familiar with some of that because my combat duty pay and family separation pay, deployed to combat areas.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. I think it amounted to a whole $160 a month for the two. So it definitely. But it sounded like they got you when you first joined, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, I had no real idea. I mean, a lot of people don't know a lot about submarines because it's such a small community. There's not very many submariners in the world. If you talk to, I'd say if I talked to someone who said they're on a sub, I'd probably know 2 or 3 people, at least in the US, I'd probably know 2 or 3 people that they know just because of
Oh,
how small of a community it really is.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you walked in there and the Navy recruiter got his hooks in you. I got to tell you, it kind of reminds me of when I joined the Army and I took my ASVAB and did pretty well on it. And I went to the MEP station to go ahead and finish my enlistment. And when I got back to the recruiting office that evening, the first thing my recruiter said to me was, "You took what?" Because I had my choice of, I mean, just almost any MOS. And
Mhm.
I turned around and took a field artillery MOS in the Fire Direction Center computing firing data. And it blew his mind,
Whew.
wondering why in the heck I did something like that. So, you know, but good experiences that I'm sure your Navy experiences was. So what was it like? I mean, when you got into the submarine service, before we get into a little bit more, what was it like being on the submarine?
Well, you
Tell us
say
a little bit about
it was a good you say a good experience. It was good and bad. You know, it's like anything really. You have your good moments and your bad moments. I'm grateful really for everything that it taught me, and you know, some of the most fun times that I had on board the submarine were a lot of the different rituals, like doing we went across into the Arctic Circle, and we did a ritual called Blue Nose, which was really fun, and we also did shellback whenever we crossed over the equator, and those are two pretty cool Navy traditions that they do. You know, no hazing, anything like that. All the hazing and so on has been banned, and a lot of people, you know, got in a lot of trouble for that kind of stuff because people were taking it too far, and so they just said, you know what, go ahead and get rid of it. But the different I guess, like I said, rituals that they do are a lot of fun. As far as being on the submarine itself, it's kind of like being in a building that's really short and
it.
smells with 150 people that are not always your favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And the building moves and shakes every now and again.
so being in really close quarters, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We so in the submarines we do hot bunking. As you know, hot
Yeah.
bunking, it means we'd have 3 guys to 2 racks. And if you're the low man on the totem pole, that means you get to sleep about half of your sleep, you know, your scheduled sleep time, and then you get woken up so you can move down to the second rack and spend the other half of your sleep time there. Um, yeah,
Mm,
there's lots of different berthings on board. The captain and the XO are the only ones that have their own rooms, and
yeah.
even they have a shared bathroom. The officers have their own rooms as well, and the officers have a bathroom. And the general or the majority of the crew has one bathroom with 2 showers and 3 stalls.
Ah,
And what's interesting too on submarines, the everything is designed to be as quiet as possible, so you don't have toilets that flush or anything like that. The toilets themselves are actually just big ball valves, so it's like a hole in a toilet bowl, and whenever you go to, you know, do your business, you flush it down, you actually just open up a valve and it falls down into a tank, and then you pull a lever, or you turn a lever that puts seawater down into the hole and washes everything down. And yeah, it's quite a smell, especially because it's in a tank, and you don't always get, you know, you don't always pump it out every
yeah.
day or after every time that somebody uses the restroom. So when you open that ball valve, you're opening up a hole to that tank full of everyone's excrement, shall we say. And it is not a pleasant thing to smell.
Well, you know what that kind of reminds me of? Of course, only it's not quite that bad. In
Mm.
fact, it's usually pretty fine, but it sounds like the toilet I have in my RV. In that, you know, you
It's a little worse. See, I had an RV
yeah,
growing up. We
yeah.
whenever we moved to Virginia, because my dad flew the RC-135 before he was at the Pentagon, and we moved from Offutt Air Force Base to Virginia, Northern Virginia, so he could be at the Pentagon. And when we first got here, we lived in a trailer for about 3 months, a fifth wheel for about 3 months, which is, you know, just an RV tow behind. And yeah, that the boat bathroom smell is, I would say, considerably worse.
Yeah, much worse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least the good thing is you didn't have to dump them by hand like you do the RV, right? Pulling the valves outside.
Well, you have to pull the valves. I mean, you dump it by hand, but not outside. Obviously, you dump
Yeah,
it into
yeah,
the ocean. But thankfully, that was not my job.
yeah. So if you can, whatever you can share with us, tell us a little bit about your mission on the submarine. What did you do, and what was your daily life like?
So I was in IT, like you said before, which means basically I fixed everybody's emails. I reset password about 100 times a day because as smart as a lot of these guys are, remembering a password is just
Yeah.
beyond them.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I did a lot of fixing passwords, a lot of email. It's a lot of I mean, it's basic IT. It's IT administration for those of you that are in IT administration. It's a lot of setting permissions on folders, things like that. I had a daily rove, which everybody on a submarine after you're qualified qualifies for certain watches while you're underway. And I will say I definitely prefer being underway to being in port because when you're underway, it's kind of it's a little more lax. You have a set routine, a set schedule. You do what you're supposed to do, and then you have time to read or so on and so forth. Of course, that is after you get qualified. Being qualified as a submariner means you get your dolphins or your warfare device. I got my dolphins in what was it? It was 4 months, which meant I was a hot runner. Hot runners are people who are at least I would say two signatures ahead of where they're supposed to be because you're supposed to. There's a certain number of signatures, a certain number of qualifications you're supposed to have signed off every week as a nub.
Yeah.
A nub, by the way, is a new underway buddy. That is the politically correct
Yeah.
terminology. But yeah, because I was a hot runner, I did get to have I got to watch TV or watch movies in the crew's mess sometimes if I was invited and things like that. But realistically, when you're a nub, before you get your fish, you're the bottom of the barrel because getting your fish on a submarine means that the people around you trust you with their life because everyone on the submarine, is a firefighter, is a first responder, is so on and so forth for everyone around them, because most of the things that can go wrong on a submarine can kill everybody in less than 30 minutes if people aren't prepared to act accordingly. The fire on a submarine is a huge deal because we recirculate our air, which means that all of the air around the boat is constantly being circulated through different vents. And one of the countermeasures for fires that we have is we have to shut off vents in certain compartments of the boat to basically cut the fire off from any other oxygen spreading throughout the boat. If somebody were to fail to do that within 5 minutes, the entire boat would be full of smoke and everyone would die from smoke inhalation. So we constantly ran drills. I will say it was a bit of an inconvenience, but it's definitely something you want to have fresh in your mind for if it actually went down. Which, well, a funny story, it actually did one time. I was a part of one real fire while we were underway. It was a really small one, and we were on top of it. We got it out. I would say within 15 or 20 seconds, we had somebody over there with a fire extinguisher, and everybody on the boat within 30 seconds. Everybody, you have your SCBAs, which are your breathing apparatuses, the fire suits, people with the hose were ready. And the compartments were shut. Everything, just flowed exactly like all the times that we had drilled, which was nice, but drilling itself, not great because they like to drill right in the middle of someone's sleep time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Always. Well, tell me this. What do you think is probably one of the best lessons that you learned from your time in the military?
I think one of the best lessons that I learned from my time in the military was to ask for respect and to treat people with respect realistically.
Yeah.
You know, the people around me, like I said, once you get your fish or once you get your warfare device in submarines, it's definitely a very close knit. It's a brotherhood. It's a lot more, I would say, intimate than the surface Navy. There's a big designation between the surface Navy and the Submariners Navy. I mean, obviously, we're in the same force, and we have the same rules, the same military code of conduct that we have to follow. However, it's a very different way of life. And they say if you're on a submarine, never ever let a submariner know something that bothers you, because if they do, then they will constantly hound and badger you upon that point, because that's what people do to pass the time. There's a theory on there's a theory
Yeah.
there's a theory on submarines that happiness is neither created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred from one person to another. So
Well, you know what? I kind of understand the close quarters. I mean, now, granted, I was still on land, but I had several deployments where I was living with my driver and another crew member in my armored track.
yeah.
And of course, the longest one I had was when I was deployed to Desert Storm, and we lived in that thing, the three of us, closed up more than half the time for 6 months. So
Mhm.
yeah, while we still had an opportunity to get out every now and then, and we were on dry land, but you still had that close quarter, connection. And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and I agree with you. I think the military does teach you to try and not only I don't want to use the demand, but not only earn the respect of other people, as much as you can, but also teaches you to respect people in so many different ways. So I think that's a good point that you make, when you
Absolutely.
start talking about that.
To that end, I definitely agree. I think that being able to earn respect from people around you and show people that you respect them, whether they do respect you or not, is a big lesson to learn. You know, in the military, rank definitely designates how you're treated,
Yeah.
most assuredly, and it, taking orders from people who you disagree with, or who you maybe you see another solution but they don't want to see it, so on and so forth. It can be daunting, it can be a hard thing to do, but learning how to do that and learning how to overcome that feeling, really, and actually respect that person for the position that they're in and for the person that they are, is a skill that's far and few in between.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're right. The respect thing is very important, because you tend to carry that into your civilian life, at least, most people do. So when you're talking about all of the camaraderie that you guys had, and the times that you had on the submarine, I kind of I thought long and hard. Of course, I had a physical injury that kind of helped push my decision. But what what was it finally that prompted you to leave the Navy? How did you know it was time, and how did it happen?
Well, in the beginning, whenever I went in, my goal was to do 4 and get out.
Oh, okay.
I was never planning on making it a career. I'd seen my dad do it, and I woefully respect everything that he did, and that was his calling. But I knew that it wasn't my calling,
Yeah.
and there were for all the camaraderie and all the good things that were there, the lives of the people that were above me didn't seem appealing to me. Yeah, there was a lot of guys that they'd spent 20 years away from their family, their friends, and so on and so forth, and it had made them jaded or distant, especially to the people that were close to them outside of the military, and that was never something that I wanted. I saw a couple of guys in leadership that were 2 3 times divorced, and so on and so forth, and it was just never something I wanted for my life. Yeah, and that's not to say that's the Navy's fault. I'm sure that those gentlemen had their own issues, and they contributed to that in some way or the other, but it just wasn't something that was for me. I'm, like I said earlier, I'm thankful for what it taught me, but I'm definitely glad to be out. The the old joke, the moniker or the acronym for Navy is never again volunteer yourself.
Well, for the Army, it says U.S. Army on the uniform,
Yeah.
and it's Uncle Sam ain't released me yet. So I know what you're talking about.
Oh
All
yeah.
right. Well, I mean, everyone has their own reasons. I know my wife and I, 3 of our 4 boys all spent time in the military, but none of them made it a career. And they're all doing other things now. So you're right, it's a career decision, and you got to try and kind of decide what's right for you and your future plan. So when
Well,
we come back from go ahead.
I would say, well, not only is it a career decision, but it's a lifestyle decision.
Oh yeah.
That's something that you have to be prepared for. And seeing it with my father, I knew what it was. And I think a lot of people that go in, they don't see it for what it is. It's time away from the people that that are around you, the people that love you. And that's not to say that the camaraderie or the brotherhood that you do get from the military isn't great and isn't fulfilling in some way. But if you're going to be in that lifestyle, it's different than what it seems at first.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely takes a full commitment. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well, folks, we're talking with U.S. Navy veteran Aram Rice, and we're going to take a commercial break for just a minute. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. So we'll be right back.
Thanks.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Again, you're listening to the Veterans Corner on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And we're back talking with Navy veteran Submariner Aram Rice. So let's get back to our discussion. So Aram, we were talking about how you made the decision, and even before you went in, that you would probably do your 4 years and then, take your experiences and leave the Navy. So how did you make that transition? How did you make that jump? What was your experience like?
Well, before that, a caveat to what I said earlier. When I went into the Navy, I had a plan for what I wanted to do if I was to stay in, and what I wanted to do if I was to continue and get out after my 4. And after I was in and I got to the point where I was LPO as an E4 after my first deployment, I took on a lot of different and more responsibility that prohibited me from doing a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do in order to advance and go forward if I was to make it a career. So that was another one of the factors that led me to leave. As far as the transition, though, it was for me, it's fun. It's a lot. It can be scary. Absolutely. Because, for 4 years, you go to the same place. Well, not really the same place, but you go to the same people, the same boat, every day. You have duty where you're on the boat for 24 hours every couple days.
Don't have to worry about picking out what you're going to wear to work, right?
Yeah. Although I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of like dressing up. So that was a little bit of a detriment to me.
Uh,
No, not to, that's not to knock the Navy uniforms. Some of them
yeah,
are,
yeah,
they're definitely sharp, but no, it can be scary. But for me, it was exciting because I was definitely ready to be done. I was ready to be out, and I was ready to put the work in to get somewhere else. And another thing, as an IT in the Navy, as an E4, you get an E4's pay regardless of what you're doing.
yeah, yeah.
I was administrating basically two networks, um, two whole networks, running servers, doing maintenance on server. I was doing a lot of work for the pay that I was getting. And when I left the Navy, I got another job for the same kind of work at almost, I would say, a 400 or 500% pay raise.
Yeah, you know what? I know what you mean. I tell you what, when I deployed to the desert with my platoon, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a platoon leader. So when I went to the desert, I had a 21 soldier platoon, and I was both platoon sergeant and platoon leader. But of course, they were only paying me my sergeant's pay.
Well, of course.
So yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, how was it? How was it? How did you find it different once you left? Because you were doing IT. I know you said the pay as soon as you got out was much different, but
Yeah.
I imagine doing IT in a civilian organization, is it that much different, or are you doing a lot of the same kind of work?
So I actually moved on from administration to networking, which is a different kind of IT work. So for lack of m- unspecific terms, I make the internet work. I
Yeah.
I fix connection, or I'm basically a project manager where I manage where fiber is going to different new devices within data centers, and data centers hold all kinds of information for whatever platform or site that is hosting their site on those servers. So people say there's a cloud. There's not really a cloud. It's just a device in a building somewhere. And,
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, I'm in that building and I'm fixing that device, or I'm installing a new device to replace that. Which to me is a lot of fun because it has a lot to do with configuration. We have a management network that sends out configurations for a lot of our host servers, but all the routers and management switches and routers, those are things that we manually have to configure, which is a lot of command line. It's really interesting work, at least to me.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
and
mean, everybody has their career interest, and we've often joked in a lot of the jobs that I've had. When you're calling IT, we've always sometimes, when they don't come fast enough or they don't fix something, you want to call them something besides IT. But I mean, everybody has their own interest in what they like to do. So, well, speaking of that, I got to ask you, since you retired, I know that you have this hip and humble antiques that you're into. And so first of all, before we start talking about that, I got to ask you, how in the world did you come up with hip and humble antiques? You got to explain that to us.
oh yeah, it's a fun story. So my mom and I actually, so my mom and my grandmother and my mom's girlfriend Angie, actually, they are, how do you say, antique aficionados,
Okay.
or most assuredly they are auction aficionados, and they love going to auction, buying different furniture, little trinkets, and so on and so forth. And so after my grandfather died last year, my mom wanted to have something that she could use to spend more time with my grandmother. And so they looked into renting a booth because they both had a plethora of excess antiques and things like that, and trinkets that they could put out to sell. And so they started a booth in Oklahoma City called Changing Seasons, and it's hosted out in the rink. And after I had talked about it, I had started a consulting company of my own called ACT Consulting. My name is Aram. My two younger brothers' names are Kale and Tavin. So ACT
Okay.
Act Consulting. That was how that came about. But after and that was an advertising firm that I ran for a little while. So I learned definitely a lot about digital marketing, Facebook marketing, things like that. And so I started thinking about it, and I talked to my mom, and I said, hey, I could definitely do that for changing seasons. And I also love going to auctions. I love going to getting antiques and going to antique shops. Why don't we also open a booth here? And so, we agreed to that, and we were going out to pick up different antiques that we got from an auction way out west in Virginia. And we passed by this little shop, and it said Hip and Humble. And I think we sat there and laughed and thought it was the coolest name. And, we I guess likened it to ourselves, one of us being hip, the other being humble. We go back and we go back and forth on who's what, but
that's what I was going to ask you. Who was who? But go ahead.
Yeah, we go back and forth on who's what, but in the end, I think both of us try to exude both of those characteristics, and we just thought it was a really cool name, so we went with it. We named our shop Hip and Humble Antiques, and then after we started getting into that, and I realized how much knowledge we had gained and all the history and things that we had learned throughout the process of starting these shops. I said, hey, why don't we start talking about it on a podcast? And, my mom agreed, and we said, well, that's Hip and Humble right there, Hip and Humble Podcast. So
well, that's how you got into it. I took a look at your site, and you guys had quite a few different types of items on there, and we can talk about those. But one thing that kind of drew my attention is that you had some military figurine type antiques and things like that. That kind of caught my attention.
Yeah,
because being military and I enjoy those types of things anyway. So, but share with us a little bit. What all do you have? And we have your site up on the screen now for our folks that are watching the show. But tell us what you have on the site.
Okay, so on our Etsy site, actually, we have lots of different stuff. Like you said, we have antique books, we have antique figurines, collectible figurines. We also have these Asian cork arts. We have quite a few of those that we got from a Vietnam veteran, actually. So there's a gentleman that goes to our church that we do Royal Rangers out of. And Royal Rangers is kind of like the Boy Scouts, where my dad and I were both commanders. So we lead a group of boys. We teach them camping, fishing, how to start a fire, survival techniques, stuff like that. It's actually pretty cool. But anyways, his property is one of the places where we go down. The Vietnam veteran, his property is one of the places where we go down and we go camping. And he has these two different buildings that we ended up helping him clean out, because he had just tons and tons of different stuff in there. And as we were cleaning it out, I looked, we were looking at all the stuff. I said, you got a lot of really nice stuff in here, a lot of different antiques, and a lot of different collectibles and so on. And so he said, well, why don't we make you an offer for all of it, and we'll take it out, we'll take it out of your hands so we can clean it. We can really clean this thing out. And and he jumped at the chance, and we've got a lot of really cool stuff out of it, which has been a lot of fun. I think those cork arts are one of my favorites, just because they're so interesting. Right? They're little scenes carved out of cork, set on top of a wooden base painted black and kind of encased in glass. The little toy soldiers that you were talking about, those are really neat. So all of the toy soldiers that we have were actually made in Russia, and we talk about this on our podcast. We have one of our episodes, I believe it's episode 4, it's called Toy Soldiers and Such. We talked about these particular toys, and it's so they're lead toys, and in the U.S. around Civil War, all the toys that were lead, they got melted down and turned into bullets. So there aren't very many, if any, American-made lead toys anymore. And if you ever find one, that's definitely very rare and very valuable. So the ones that we have actually are from Russia, and they are lead toys because, as you might know, before before people figured out that lead was, poisonous and bad for kids, they used it to make everything because it was a really cheap, very malleable metal that could be used.
So I have to ask you,
Yeah.
you have your hip and humble antiques, and again, want to remind our viewers that your link is on the screen so they can go and check out what you have.
Mm-hmm.
But you were talking and telling us about how you got involved in this with your mother, and so I had to ask you though, does your wife share your interest with this, or is she how does she feel? Is she into the antiques like you, or is she kind of on the outside looking in, sitting there shaking her head with that old thing?
Mm-hmm.
Behind every successful man, there's a woman shaking her head, that type of thing. You heard
Oh,
that
no,
before,
no,
right?
no.
So,
I've
so
heard
how
it.
does
I've
she
heard it.
feel about this?
My wife is awesome. She's amazing. She supports me in everything I do, and she makes me want to be the best version of myself. And I couldn't have lucked out more in the partner that I got in life. She's beautiful, she's loving, she's caring, she's everything and more, realistically. And as far as Hip and Humble goes, she is actually also an artist. And so no, we sell antiques, collectibles, and we also sell some of her handmade art. She's
Oh,
made different. I would call her a clay maker or a potter. She has
mhm.
different paints and clays that she's made, that we've sold at our shops, and they're really beautiful pieces. If you click on that link and you go to our Instagram page, and it's hipin.humble on Instagram. If you scroll down in our post, you'll find a couple of pictures of her art, and they're really, really pretty pieces. I'm super proud of everything that she does, of course, but I definitely think that they're high quality, to say the least. And
Yeah.
they're just really cool little trinkets to have, really interesting things to put up on the wall. Some of them that she's made are these basically plaques that will put different quotes or things that we've written into them, and different designs in the clay, and they're just really pretty pieces. And so yeah, she's not as into the antiques as my mom and I are, but she's definitely involved. And I'm so grateful for that, because this business, the antique business, and also the podcast, it originally started as a way to bring our family closer, and to be able to involve her, and that has really fulfilled me in a way that I don't think anything else has. It's given me a passion for antiques and a passion for podcasting, because I think it really has cultivated the relationships that I have with my friends and my family. I'm so grateful for all of them, and their involvement and their support, and everything that we've done. And for those of you listening too, we have at that link, we have our Patreon page, and so right now, obviously, everything that we do for the podcast is funded by people who enjoy it or who want to donate. So if you wanted to, you could definitely go to that link there, and you'll see on that page a place where you can click into our Patreon to donate. And
Okay.
it's a lot of fun, like I said, and it really has brought us closer together.
Yeah, it sounds like you're pretty passionate about it. So, for those of you out there watching the show, make sure you take a few minutes to take a look at Aram's site to see what he has on there and what he's doing. So, Aram, I got to ask you though, before we wrap up.
Yeah, what do you got to
Um,
ask?
and no, this one's not a landmine question here.
All right.
But no, I just have to ask you, if you could share one thought that you had with your fellow veterans out there, what would it be?
Learn to
I
love
don't want to
yourself.
put you on the spot, but
No,
I'm
no,
going to
no.
put you on the spot. It's
Hey,
okay.
I'm here. Might as well, right?
That's right.
Learn to love yourself.
Yeah.
Learn to love and respect yourself. Honestly, that was the hardest thing for me through that period of my life, and moving past it was understanding my worth, understanding that I did deserve to be loved, and learning to love myself, and move past that point of my life. Because in the military, it's very easy to, feel loved by the people around you, but feel oppressed by the people above you, and so on and so forth. I think that's a common thing. But whenever you get out, there's no ranks. There's no order to the way that society is set up. It's just it's personal interactions with from one person to another, and you have to judge based on their actions towards you, how they feel. But really, none of that matters. What matters is how you feel about yourself and what you see in yourself. Because if you love yourself, if you believe in yourself, then what you want, and what first of all, what you want might change. The things that you want for yourself might change based on how you feel about yourself, and that's okay. But really learn to love and respect yourself. I think that's the biggest thing. There's so many guys that have been in and been out that I've known that have just, they've been depressed, or they've been hurt, or they didn't know what to do or where to go. And really it starts with personal responsibility and a personal accountability, respect, and love for yourself.
That's some good thoughts. In fact, I had a guest a couple of shows ago that said something similar, not quite to that end, but something similar about, the respect that you get while you're in the military, and then, transmitting that respect for yourself and other people. So yeah, very, very similar message, but that's a very good message. Well, Aram, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show tonight. It's been really nice having the opportunity to talk with you. And for those of you that have been watching, again, we want to encourage you to take a look at Aram's site, the Hip and Humble Antiques. You'll see the link up on the screen. Go take a look and see what he has to offer. And Aram, thank you very much for being on tonight. And as we wind the show up, I want to take just a moment to tell our veterans about the VFW 2020 Voter Input Survey. There are about 2.1 million service members. U.S. service members, and 21 million veterans, including spouses and voting age children. So the VFW believes it's important to survey this electoral group. And they have a 10-question survey, which they're encouraging the veterans and their families, both active duty and retired or ex-veterans, to take about 10 minutes and go to the website. It's up on your screen, to take a look at their veteran survey. They want to use the information the VFW does to help serve the veteran community. So if you have an opportunity, please take a few minutes. Go to the voter input survey. You'll also find the link to this on my webpage for the show. You'll be able to go in later on and take a look and find the link and click on it. So again, I want to thank you for listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network in the Veterans Corner. Again, we love to bring veterans together and have them share their story, and we want to thank you for listening, and we hope and inspire veterans to live your best life. I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, and I'd like to invite you to visit theliteraryvet.net, my author site, and the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network at goingsolomedia.com, where you'll find my shows and information about my work. So thank you, and that's all we have for tonight, and good night.
Thanks, Paul.